everyone, I just did a video on thoughts on today's Bitcoin price, as in right now. This is some thoughts about the historical price of Bitcoin to put that in context. I still had some time here on my lunch break, so I figured I'd do a second video before I run out of time. Anyway, so when Bitcoin started in 2009, by 2010, the price was in the pennies, literally pennies per Bitcoin. In fact, at one point, you could buy like 1,300 Bitcoin for $1. Seriously. So, and the first purchase of Bitcoin was 2 Papa John's pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, which of course would be now worth, I don't know, $570 million or something crazy like that. Okay, so over time, 2010, the price starts at a couple pennies a Bitcoin, and the price goes and it goes up and it goes up. And just like I talked about in my last video, you've got a combination of speculators, which are traders, traders, tourists, true believers, and people just making decisions based on their capital needs. And all of those people are doing their thing, and the price is going up, and there's price corrections of 20%, 30%, 40%, 50% along the way. I mean, there's major price corrections. And eventually the price tops out at $32 per coin back in 2011. All right, so let's talk about that. Why $32 per coin? Well, first of all, the price is completely arbitrary. That just happened to be the price at which the buyers, the sellers outran the buyers, meaning at $32, finally there was not enough buyers to buy every Bitcoin that was for sale at that price. And at $32, for the first time in that, not the first time because there had been a bunch of price corrections on the way up to $32, but at $32, they hit a wall where the very next person who wanted to sell Bitcoin for more than $32 could not find a buyer. And so the price started coming back down, and the price came down from $32 all the way down to $2. So that is a 94% price correction, 94, a 94% price correction. So if you think a 10 or 20 or 30% price correction in the modern world is a lot, back in 2010, 2011, that first big run, the price correction was 94%, which, as you can imagine, was brutal. Now, if Bitcoin was a financial bubble, then you would have to ask the question, wait, why did it stop at $2? Why did it go from pennies up to $32 and then it crashed down to $2? If Bitcoin was a financial bubble, if there was no, fundamental underlying value, then the price should have gone back down to pennies or down to zero, and you would have never heard of Bitcoin and it would have never been a thing. But the reason it stopped at $2 was because the combination of traders and tourists and true believers at that time, by the time the price got down to $2, there was enough true believers to say, this is crazy. At $2 per Bitcoin, I'll buy as much of it as I can. And so at $2 per Bitcoin, the number of buyers outpaced the number of sellers, and the price stabilized and bounced off of $2 and went back up. So again, starts at a couple pennies. The first time Bitcoin had a price, starts at almost nothing, runs up to $32. Then it crashes to $2, and that is caused by, on the way up, eventually the buyers, the sellers outran the buyers. Essentially, the buyers were exhausted at $32 per coin, and then on the way back down, the sellers were exhausted at $2 per coin, meaning there was more buy pressure than sell pressure. Okay, so what happens next? Well, if Bitcoin was a financial bubble, or if there was no underlying value, the price would have kept going back down to zero, or it would have stabilized at $2, and people would have said, well, this is a nice little novelty at $2. But what happens? Well, true believers kept buying because Bitcoin was just as amazing back then as it is now. And so at $2, true believers are still buying. Well, eventually their buying pressure overcomes the selling pressure of everybody who thought maybe Bitcoin was just one and done. Maybe it was up like a rocket and down like a rock, and that was the end of Bitcoin. So eventually the buy pressure outpaces the sell pressure, and the price bounces off of $2. And again, some of this happens in the course of, weeks or months. Some of this happens in the course of, seconds or minutes, where it bounces off a $2 price and goes back up. But anyway, so then it goes from $2 all the way up to $1,200. Okay, so imagine that price run from $2 all the way up to $1,200. Now, along the way, there were numerous small price corrections, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%. There were major price corrections along the way, but each one eventually bounced back and the price went up to $1,200. Okay, At $1,200, the exact same thing happened. They ran out of buyers at $1,200. The sellers, outpaced the buyers, and the price crashed back down to $92. Now, you gotta ask yourself the question, wait, if it started at $2 and then it went to $1,200, why did the price come back down to $92? Which is 46 times higher, 46 times higher to come back down to $92 rather than $2. And the answer is in that multi-year period between $2 and $92, a bunch of tourists and traders and, speculators had turned into true believers. A significant portion or a meaningful percentage of them had studied Bitcoin, had studied its underlying value, the technology, and realized it was amazing, and realized rather than selling it and trading it, they actually just wanted to hold it. Or rather than kicking the tires and bailing at the first sign of trouble, that they were actually holding for the long haul. So once again, if Bitcoin was a speculative bubble or a financial bubble or did not have any underlying fundamental value, the price would have gone back to $2 or it would have gone back to zero, frankly, if there was not value there. But again, it went down to $92 all the way from $1,200. Well, then the same thing happened. From $92, the price would then climbed over the course of a number of years, again, along the way with 20%, 30%, 40% price corrections, each of which, again, felt exactly like Bitcoin's price today, where people are like, oh no, it's the end. And then ultimately the price went up to $19,000. Okay, from $19,000, exact same thing happened. The marketplace ran out of buyers to push the price higher, and so the sell pressure exceeded the buy pressure, and the price dropped from $19,000 to $3,200. Now again, the lowest prices I've talked about here are pennies, then $2, then $92, and now we're talking about $3,200. Now, if Bitcoin was, again, a financial bubble or did not have underlying fundamental value, then it would not have gone back down to $3,200. It would have gone back to $2 or to pennies or to zero. But it didn't. It didn't even go back to $92. It went down to $3,200. And that was in, I believe, 2020-ish. That was before the 2021 run-up. Okay, so then what happens next? Well, it bounces off $3,200 and Bitcoin goes up to more than $60,000. And then the price comes back down in the big crash of 2022 after FTX blew up to $15,500. But again, now we're talking about $15,500 being the lowest possible price it can get before the sellers, run out and they run into a wall of true believers that just will buy every single coin that someone's selling for less than $15,500. And so the price just could not go below $15,500. So starts at a couple pennies, runs way up, then it hits a floor where the price just can't go below $2 because there's just too many buyers at that level. And they're just willing to buy every last coin. Then it runs way up again, comes way back down, and hits a buy wall at $92, meaning there's a bunch of buyers that are just, when it gets that cheap, they're willing to just pay whatever it takes to, they'll buy as many Bitcoin as people are willing to sell at that level. Then it runs way up and comes back to $3,200. Then it runs way up and comes down to $15,500. So what can we learn from that? Well, what we can learn is on multi-year periods, because each of those was a multi-year period, we can learn a couple of things. One, there were numerous 20%, 30%, 40%, even 50% price drawdowns in the process of those huge price runs, just like we're in a whatever 20% or 30% or whatever it is price drawdown from the all-time high right now. There were numerous ones of those on the way from, pennies to $32, on the way from $2 to $1,200, on the way from $92 up to $19,000, and then on the way from I guess what it would have been $3,200 up to more than $60,000, and then again on the way from $15,500 up to $74,000, the recent all-time high. Each of those huge run-ups has had numerous 20 or 30 or whatever percent drawdowns on the way. And they ultimately, Bitcoin came back and set a new all-time high after each one of those. Okay, so that's the first thing we can learn. Second thing we can learn is that each of the little sort of drawdowns in between behaves very similar to the big macro drawdowns. They happen for the same reason. The price of any asset goes up and down based on the willingness of buyers and sellers to buy or sell at any given price. And that is the same for any stock, for any bond, for any asset, for any commodity. It's 100% a function of supply and demand. Now there's outside factors. Obviously, there's international wars. There's people's needs for liquidity. There's how much money printing is the Federal Reserve doing, and a bunch of other things. But again, all of those things interplay to result in prices going up and down. So if you look at a 5-minute period of time for Bitcoin, the price goes up and down, even on Coinbase. If you set the price on Coinbase to 1 hour, I think that's the minimum they'll let you set it to. There's even choppy ups and downs in a single hour. And the question is, in that hour, did anything change about Bitcoin in that hour? And the answer is no. All that's happening is the random, buying and selling and interplay of supply and demand are playing out in that 1 hour, even though nothing's changing with Bitcoin. Now, in the course of months or years, there could be, macro factors, and there could be, news events and things like that. But in the very sort of short term, it's just supply and demand at work. So over the long haul, supply and demand are at work. Bitcoin has always bounced off of whatever the lows are. It's always come back to set a new all-time high. There has never been a time where Bitcoin's, multi-year low has not been radically higher than the previous multi-year low. Again, the numbers we've talked about so far are $2, then $92, then $3,200, then $15,500. And with the Bitcoin ETFs and the halving and all of that, including, Hong Kong ETF, etc., I think the exact same thing's going to happen. And I think the only difference is I think, the next time the price goes down on a multi-year low, I think it'll be significantly higher than today's price. Now, again, that probably means the price goes to, $180,000 a coin, and then it comes all the way back down to $90,000 per coin. Well, if it ends up crashing all the way to $90,000 per coin, that's a $90,000 per coin you can buy right now for $57,000. So it's a $57,000 coin that you can potentially buy, in the future in a massive price crash at $90,000. And of course, nobody knows when future price corrections are going to happen. I think, most Bitcoiners would predict that, the second half of 2025 or 2026 is the soonest we get a sort of a major price correction, just because it tends to be 3 years up, 1 year down. And 2022 was a big down year. And so it tends to be 2023, 2024, and 2025. And 2026 will probably be a down year. So if somebody said, well, when's the next sort of big drawdown? I would say probably second half of 2025, which is next year, not this year, but next year. Or, perhaps 2026, which is a long time from now. And I think between then, the price goes way high. Then it comes back down to some price that's higher than it is today. And then, it goes way, way, way high again. But that is 100% normal. So to recap, just like I did on my last video, is anything wrong with Bitcoin? No. Is this totally normal for every high growth asset? Yes. Should you buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can? Yes. That has always been my opinion. That's not going to change. And one day in the very near future, whether it's, days, weeks, or months, the price will set a new all-time high. Everybody will forget that they were feeling nervous back when it was 57,000 a coin. And then it will go through another price dip, and maybe the price dip, 3 months from now goes from 90,000 down to 75. And at 75, everybody's going to be freaking out because, they're going to totally forget that price dip feels exactly like this one. And the price is way higher than it ever has been before and all of that. So, regardless of what a price something is, everybody gets nervous when it's lower. And so if I went to somebody right now and said, would you feel nervous if Bitcoin was at 75,000 a coin? They would say, no, I'd be euphoric. That's higher than it's ever been in history. But the answer is no. If it went to 90,000 first and then it went to 75, they'd be feeling exactly like they do now. Because anytime something goes high and then it comes back down, people feel, bummed out about it. They just do. Humans feel bummed out about things if they've ever been higher and are now lower, regardless of the price. So anyway, that's the highlights. Great buying opportunity for Bitcoin right now. Everything it's doing is 100% normal of companies like Amazon, Tesla, Apple, Google, Facebook, Amazon. This is just what price performance does. And it does it for a million reasons, most of which I covered in my previous video, which was a few minutes ago, earlier today. So go watch that if you want more of this content and you started with this one. And anyway, so everything's normal. Sit tight, buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can, sit on it, and just be patient. And there is nobody in the history of Bitcoin that has bought Bitcoin and just been patient that long term was unhappy about it. Just never happened. It always bounces back, and that's what happens with assets that have very high growth rates and, you know, incredible underlying fundamental value, which Bitcoin has. So hopefully this is helpful. Hit me up with any questions as always. And if you bought Bitcoin and you're nervous about it, text me. I'm happy to provide a reassuring word if that would be helpful to you in your Bitcoin journey. Because again, I've done that for people in the past when, you know, Bitcoin dropped from, I don't know, $35,000 to $28,000 and everybody was freaking out. And of course, you know, $28,000 is way lower than $57,000. So regardless of what the price, and I'm sure I'll be here on Facebook at some point in the future because Bitcoin will drop from $500,000 per coin to $400,000 per coin. And everybody will be freaking out, wondering if everything's okay. And I'll be recording another video just like this, assuring everyone that a epic 20% price drop, which at that point in the future will probably be epic because, you know, the volatility keeps coming down with time. So once it's up at $500,000 a coin, a 20% price correction probably is going to be quite a big deal. I will be assuring everyone that everything's fine with Bitcoin. It's only down to 400,000 per coin. Hold tight, be patient, and everything will be okay. So anyway, that's where we are. All is well in the world of Bitcoin. It's just a great buying opportunity, and up to you whether you take advantage of that. As always, hopefully this is helpful. I'm here for anything you need. Thanks.